It's game week, and this is the week we finally learn just how good this Utah football team is.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. It's your first time tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You can download today. My name is JT Wistrcill. Excited to be joined on today's show by Sam Foster, editor for the Daily Universe. Sam, great having you on. We got a lot of things to talk about. AP poll, still no Utah. BYU continuing to climb. Also, a week of chaos in the Big 12. But first, Sam, it's game week for Utah. It was nice to have a bye week, especially for the Utah Utes getting healthy, being able to rest up. But I'm really excited not just to have football back, but to find out how good this Utah team is. I think it's very interesting when you talk about the seasons played out for Utah so far. Some of that being on Utah and some of that just being about the schedule as well. Because in a lot of ways, we don't know exactly what this Utah team is. This last week, I felt like we learned a lot in college football. Like Penn State and Texas, they are not contenders to me. Maybe they still squeeze into the college football playoff, but we learned pretty clearly they're not top 4 teams in the country. I believe Utah is a top 4 team in the Big 12. But when it comes to proving that, it's kind of hard. I know they're not the best team. I've said I feel Tech is the class of this conference. So that's why I look at a Texas Tech and I go, okay, it's okay that you lost to them because then they pummeled Houston now too. I feel like that NIL investment looks legit. But Utah has also just pummeled the rest of the teams they played. Frankly, they haven't been very good. I don't think West Virginia is very good. And I know what UCLA did against Penn State, but I don't still think that's a very good Bruins team, especially when Utah played them at that point too. So Sam, I think in a lot of ways, we don't know how good this Utah team can be. And this is the week we finally find out that answer.
Well, JT, first of all, thanks for having me on. Coming live from my parents' basement. It was Grandma Judy's 89th birthday today, so shout out Grandma Judy. So yeah, when it's Grandma's birthday, a duty calls, you got to go home. But yeah, once again, thanks for having me on. And yeah, you're right. Utah has yet to really make that statement. I mean, what's their statement win? Is it at Wyoming? That's not going to sway any voters in the future. Is it against UCLA? Like, yeah, they beat Penn State, but like, okay, 1-4, congrats. Like, they don't have that signature win, and the one chance they've had was Texas Tech. And yeah, the score may not have told the whole entirety of that game. It was a lot closer than the final score said, but it's still a 24-point loss. Like, it doesn't matter how it actually played out. It's still a 24-point loss at home against the biggest opponent of the season. That was their chance to actually go in, get a win. They haven't done it. So yeah, you're right. This Arizona State game is a huge chance for your season. It's probably the best team you're going to play for the rest of the year. Maybe BYU might have a say in that. BYU at least is the biggest game. It's just always going to be the biggest game for Utah and vice versa. So yeah, these next 2 games are huge for Utah.
Massive game coming up here against the Sun Devils. Can't wait for it. Utah favored right now, 4.5. It's very interesting. The line opens up there. It's so funny to think about the last time Utah played Arizona State. Not last year, 2 years ago. When they made the trip to Salt Lake City, it was a 55-3 Sun Devil thrashing. The Utes just steamrolled them, and Kenny Dillingham has completely turned this program around. They stumbled against Mississippi State, but Mississippi State, they're a lot better. They took a really good Tennessee team to overtime recently, so you look at that loss a little differently now than I think at the time we were all like, hey, it's a disappointing loss for Arizona State. It still is, but not a bad loss with Mississippi State getting better. This is an Arizona State team that's playing well, but they have barely squeaked by a couple of what I still consider good Big 12 teams, but still squeaked by. 27-24 back-to-back weeks on the road against Baylor. Then at home, you barely beat a TCU team. I think those are both teams that could still potentially contend in this conference, although it's going to take a lot for Baylor. Baylor and TCU feel more like giant slayers to me at this point than anything else. I don't think they'll end up in Arlington. Utah still has a shot to do that. ASU obviously still with a shot to do that coming up here. But this Sun Devils team, to me, they lost their heartbeat in Cam Scadaboo. Sam Levitt is really good. Jordan Tyson is nice. I like that offensive line overall, but there's not a ton else in the pass catching department. Heading into, actually, I was on a bye this last weekend, so still no one outside of Tyson with over 200 receiving receiving yards, a secondary that is not fantastic. We all remember the big play they gave up against Mississippi State. Sure, they've hung in tough against some good passing quarterbacks, Hoover and Robertson, but that pass defense was dreadful last year and still not off to the best start this year. They don't rank in the top 8 of either offense or defense in the Big 12. This feels like a vulnerable Arizona State team to me, Sam, and I agree that Utah should be favored in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're going to go predictions right now, but my prediction for the game, I think it's a coin flip, honestly. I'm going Utah 24, Arizona State 23. Like, I think it's that close.
Yeah.
I think the big reason why I'm giving Utah the edge is just because it's at home. But you mentioned Jordan Tyson. He is kind of the one big receiver they have. If you look at the stats of their pass catchers, it's actually really similar to Utah. So it goes Jordan Tyson, one is like almost 500 yards on the season, 7 touchdowns. One of the best receivers in college football. Might be a first-round pick. Like, he's elite. And the next best receiver on their team has, I believe, 5 catches on the season. The rest of their pass catchers are just made up of tight ends and running backs. And that's actually really similar to Utah, where it goes Ryan Davis is number 1, has over 30 receptions on the year. And then the next highest receiver is Tobias Merriweather with 6 receptions. It's really similar. And then Utah's lineup is just made up of tight ends, running backs, the two-way players, Smith Snowden, Jackson Benny, Lander Barton. It's really similar. I do like Utah's D line over Arizona State's offensive line. I do think that's kind of the battle to watch for. But what scares me the most and what I think should scare Utah fans the most is that Utah's secondary has not inspired me this season. At least to the level where I would feel confident going up against Jordan Tyson. And that's a big ask. So I think the big kind of thing to look for in this game will be, how does Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson maybe punish Utah's secondary? Can Utah's secondary actually go out and make a statement? Is Benny 100%? Can Smith Snowden cover Tyson? Like, it's just a lot of things that I don't think work well in Utah's favor when it comes to covering Tyson. And we'll see how that plays out.
That is interesting. I feel like the secondary is held up okay. The biggest thing I want to see from Utah is Sam. They need to tackle better. Like, that is by far the biggest thing.
Well, the secondary last game, they had 5 different defensive backs, I think, missed tackles in the last game.
Yeah. West Virginia still, we're talking? Yes.
You can't do that against this Arizona State team, especially if they're potentially a Big 12 title contender. I mean, you can't do that. So especially against Jordan Tyson, you can't be missing tackles and giving up extra yards when they have one of the best receivers in the country. You aren't going to win like that.
I agree. This is where I trust Morgan Scalley. I think he's going to have a good plan for Tyson. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Utah just doubled him and was like, hey, let's see who else can beat us here. Utah saw Sam Levitt last year. You know, it's funny to think, like, that was one-legged Cam Rising running around out there trying to make something happen. And Utah still battled and was right there in the fourth quarter. I think that the game ended still within striking distance for Utah. Arizona State won, but it was still like a game where Utah was in it all the way. And now it's a year in which the Sun Devils have the target on their back, and it's a Utah team that is definitely hungry for the opportunity here. What were you going to say, Sam?
That was kind of the big Cam Scadaboo game, at least from my recollection. That was the game where it was like, oh, shoot, this guy is real. He should be in the Heisman ceremony at the end of the year. He ended up not being in the Heisman ceremony for whatever reason. Don't know how that worked out. But that was the big Cam Scadaboo game. Losing him, I think, really affects Arizona State. I still think they can compete in the Big 12, but I don't think they're nearly as good as they were last year. I mean, he was the heart and soul of that team. He was the Christian McCaffrey of that team. So that's another thing that works well in Utah's favor, is that I don't think – I do like their starting running back, Raleek, from USC, but he's not Cam. So,
It'll be interesting. You know, I feel like what we talk about, we're going to learn for sure, like, hey, how good is this Utah team? I feel like they have a good quarterback. I don't know if he's a great quarterback for college football yet. Still has the chance to be. Might have just had a bad game and hurt against Texas Tech. But as of right now, he's performed well against the not great competition and needs to show it against a better defense. He'll see that this week. Love the offensive line that Utah has, even if it's not a top 3 unit probably based on what Tech was able to come and do and win the line of scrimmage. Need to see more from the pass catchers. Like this Utah defense overall, running game is there. But the question is it going to be there against Arizona State this weekend? And Arizona State is ranked, but Utah is not. How should we feel about that? We're going to tell you in one moment. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's the most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love how Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It tracks your reps, suggests the right weights, and corrects your form, making every rep safer and smarter. And your personalized class recommendations keep you engaged. Your workouts are tailored to your vibe and your energy level each workout. So you can head over today and give Peloton a try. I promise you won't regret it. Head over now, see what Peloton has to offer. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. You can head over to onepeloton.com right now. The Utah Utes were once again left out of the AP polls, Sam, and I got to be honest, I don't have a massive issue with this. Yes, teams that were ranked lost and fell out. I actually want to give AP poll. We love to pile on the AP poll when they don't do a good job. Polling Texas and Oklahoma, polling Texas and Penn State out was absolutely the correct move for what happened. But we don't always see them penalize the big brands the same as they do some of the other teams. So I was really pleased to see both Texas and Penn State drop out, neither one with a win against a P4 team. Now, they played some decent ones. I don't know how good Florida is, we obviously know UCLA is not very good. So until they show it, I think you got to wait to get them ranked. But, this is a Utah team. Could they be in there at 25? They could be right there with Florida State in there, South Florida in there. Would I have Utah in my top 25? I do. I feel like Utah is one of the 25 best teams in college football right now. But at the end of the day, Sam, that's what this weekend is for. If Utah wins against Arizona State, I don't see how they wouldn't be ranked after this week. Agree?
Yeah, I don't think you can be super mad if you're a Utah fan. Like you said, if they win this week against Arizona State, and if they win next week the week after against BYU, you're back to a top 15 program. There's nothing that Utah can really look back on and be, we should be ranked because of this win or because of this loss. The one chance you have was against Texas Tech. If you beat Tech, you're the 10th best team in the country. I mean, it's as simple as that. Tech was 10, right, in this last one?
Yeah, Tech was actually in the top 10 now. That's which is another thing. I'm a huge Tech is 9, which I totally agree with.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. But yeah, I don't think you can be too upset. I think you have more of a reason to be upset if you're Nebraska or Cincinnati, who has a signature win, unlike Utah. But like we said, you win this week, you're in. So it's not really something to be mad about.
I would have Cincinnati in. That's one thing I can actually say looking at this. I feel like it's fair to evaluate these resumes as the season goes on. Cincinnati's resume, I know this is Locked On Utes, it's just clearly better than Utah. I value the Kansas win and the Iowa State win clearly any more than a win Utah has. So that's how I would look at it. And I would say right now, Cincinnati's resume, what they've done is fitting of a top 25 team. I was a little down on the Bearcats. I thought that was a bad loss for Kansas 2 weeks ago. Now what Sorsby, Satterfield have been able to do, that's a game that I'm glad that game's in Rice-Eccles Stadium, because that is a Cincinnati team that's showing a lot of promise and improvement. And I think that'll be another good challenge for this Utah team coming up. But yeah, like Utah against a Florida State, right? Even Florida State, they have the win against Bama. South Florida has the win against Florida. Memphis, they're undefeated. Like their best win is Arkansas. How great is that? That's debatable, but they are undefeated. So that's fine there. Cincinnati was the first team left out. Then it's Texas, Penn State. Then it's Utah. Then Nebraska, UCLA, or excuse me, USC. UCLA ain't getting up here, but they were a fun story this week so far. So you get a couple other teams in there, but I love that the Big 12 is getting that respect too. You have Iowa State not dropping out of the rankings. I don't think they should have. You have Arizona State back in the rankings. We'll talk about BYU in a moment, how I feel about them, but I love that Tech is in the top 10 as well. I feel like this is the Big 12 getting some respect by the top 25. Would love Cincinnati or Utah in there, but overall, I feel like the Big 12 is getting some respect this week, Sam.
Actually, one thing that I would do was I actually really like Nebraska. Nebraska has the road win at Cincinnati, and so that's when I think the number 25 spot, which they gave to Florida State, who is 3-2. Yes, their 2 losses are, well, I don't know how good Virginia is, but like their 2 losses are okay. But like I don't think at this point I would like a 3-2 team in the top 25 just based off of principle. Yes, I do think Florida State is a top 25 team, but just off of like the principle, I don't think they should be in. So that's why I would rather have a Nebraska or a Cincinnati. And I mean, Nebraska, they went on the road, beat Cincinnati. Their one loss is a 3-point loss to Michigan. And that's not a bad loss. So yeah, but like we said, Give it time. You win, you're in. Don't be upset about AP poll stuff,
Yeah, that's the hard part. It's a tough job to rank them, and that's why I
Yeah.
appreciate them dropping the teams out. Because, Sam, I don't know about you. Like, I feel like Penn State and Texas will end the season as top 25 teams, and I'm sure almost every AP poll voter does. But at the end of the day, this is also not just a reflection of like what's going to happen. It's what you've done. And so far on the season, those teams have not been impressive. Coming into the season, we all thought Clemson was going to be really good at football. It turns out they're not. So you've got to evaluate them based on what's happened. I think that is a great point on Nebraska because they do have that head-to-head win against Cincinnati. So that would be totally fair if Nebraska is up there. One team, though, that is in here that I'm fine with them being in here, Sam, is the team that you cover, the BYU Cougars. Here's my thing with BYU still, because a lot of people would say, JT, why aren't you giving BYU their credit, their respect? Here's the deal. BYU is in the same category as Utah in some ways. If I'm still holding out, like I wanted them to prove how good they actually are when they play a quality team. And by quality team, I mean a top 10 Big 12 team at least. I know ECU is a little better, but I'm still not super impressed by them. We still don't know how good Utah is because they've beaten the bad teams, but they've yet to beat a really good team. I feel like I can say the same thing about BYU. So that's why I'm reserving judgment. BYU is undefeated. It's fine that they're in these rankings, but I would be lower on them. Than I still feel like Utah, a Cincinnati right now, I'm more impressed with too. And Iowa State, a lot of these teams, I'm more impressed with them than BYU so far, simply for the resume. You cover this BYU team. How legit do you think they are?
I do think that they should be as highly ranked as they are.
Okay.
Like you said, they haven't had a loss, and you can't really penalize them. Yes, they haven't played a really good team yet. In fact, you could argue they've only played pretty bad teams. I think either ECU or Colorado would be their best opponent on the season, and that's nothing to write home about. But here's why I really like BYU. Their defense is amazing. I think their defense has picked up just right where they left off from last year. I think that's a top 10 unit in the country. Against West Virginia, they ended up allowing 28 points, but two of those touchdowns were off of turnovers from BYU in West Virginia territory. One of them was a fumble that West Virginia picked up on the 3-yard line, and then West Virginia just scored on like the next following drive. So I don't really fault BYU's defense too much, but I like this BYU team. And Bear Bachmeier against Colorado actually was given a chance to go out and win a game. He was down by 14. They said, hey, Bear, you can't rely on the defense anymore. You got to go out and win. And he did it. And you say what you want about his stats, and sometimes he's been held a little bit back. He hasn't done like Johnny Manziel freshman type year stuff, things like that. But he's good. I mean, and he's good enough to win games. And in my opinion, I think he's good enough to get BYU into Big 12 title contention. That's how much I like Bear Bachmeier. I'm in on this BYU team. I still think there's flaws, and we're going to see that over the next stretch of games. They have a gauntlet of a schedule coming up, but I like them.
Yeah, and they've done what they were supposed to do. And I will say Bear's been better than I thought he would be coming into the year. I still just want to see it against one of those other Big 12 contenders. But like you said, Sam, the schedule will definitely allow for that coming up. And, we are just 2 weeks away removed from the Utah BYU game. I cannot wait for that one. You talked about just how good BYU's defense is. I could say a similar thing for how good the Utah defense has been. So I'm thinking that one will be the under. I'd bet the under on that one. I do not think that is going to be a very high scoring game when those two teams match up right now. Said coming into the year, I thought Utah would win in Provo. Based on what I've seen so far, I'll still say that's the case. Sam, how do you view that matchup, even though we are 2 weeks away from it?
Okay. I might have kind of a cop-out answer for you, so I hope you like this answer. But my answer is this. If Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker are healthy for that game, BYU wins. If they aren't, Utah wins. Okay. I don't know how familiar the Utah fans are with Isaiah and Jack. They're the two starting linebackers of BYU. I think by far the best players on BYU's team, and they are what makes that defense elite. Now, I might say something a little sacrilegious here for Utah ears, but think about 2021 Devin Lloyd. That is the impact that I think that these two linebackers have on this defense. Think about that 2021 defense around Devin. It was a really good defense, but Devin Lloyd made that defense elite. Devin Lloyd was he was the heart and soul of that team. He's what made everything run, stuffed the stat sheet. That's what Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker are like for this BYU defense. And against West Virginia, Jack Kelly looks to have potentially a pretty serious injury on either his left arm or shoulder. They haven't released it yet. We'll find out tomorrow what the verdict is. And that's really scary to think that he might be hurt. And then Isaiah Glasker came up limping in the second quarter as well. and he sat out the entire second half. But I think that was a little bit more precautionary. So that's what I'm keeping my eye on. If these two players can play in the Utah game, I think they are the two best players on BYU's team that can contain Devin Dampier. But if they don't play, I think Utah's just going to be able to run all over this BYU defense.
Yeah, and I have no issue with that. Like you said, the comparison to, I mean, those two are fantastic. Kelly, Glasker, and look, the Utah interior offensive line is still top 10 offensive line in the country. The interior offensive line got pushed around against Texas Tech. That Kenyatta Tanavasa, the D tackles that BYU has are pretty good. So that will be a fascinating matchup. Cannot wait to get Utah, BYU, part 2 of their Big 12 rivalry in football. It's going to be an epic clash. You know what else was epic this last week in the Big 12? We're going to talk about some of the outcomes, what it means for this conference and Utah as a whole in one moment. But first, this episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Square. Your favorite neighborhood sports run on Square. There are certain businesses that make the neighborhood the neighborhood. These are the places that become extensions of your home, whether it's the sports bar dedicated to your team's fan base, the spot with the best wings in town for game day, or that beloved local chain that's been rooted in your community for years. These businesses are what bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. And, you know, with the neighborhood, I mean, how many do you guys must be like me, right? We have a favorite spot, whether it's a coffee shop, a place you're just going to go get a taco, even breakfast, whatever it may be. When we show up as a community to our community spots, it can mean big business for local business owners. Money spent in the neighborhood stays in the neighborhood. Square is proud to partner with more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege. That's square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, we'll see you in the neighborhood. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if yours wins. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience even more exciting. Whether it's college football, right? We already mentioned it. Utah is favored against Arizona State, 4.5 right now, over under 49.5. I think that's a really good number. I think it could very well go over that, but I could also see it going under with these two defenses. I'll lean over 49.5 right now, but however you're leaning, head over to FanDuel Sportsbook. We also got a great Monday Night Football game tonight. Chiefs taking on the Jaguars. However you're feeling, you can head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. Visit FanDuel.com, download the app, and get started with FanDuel Sportsbook. Utah was not in action this last week, but there still was some Big 12 action. We already talked about BYU a little bit. They had a good performance going against West Virginia. I don't think West Virginia is the worst team in the Big 12. Cough, cough, Oklahoma State. I do think they're a bottom 3. So the fact that Utah and BYU have both beaten up on West Virginia is part of the reason I've said how we don't know how good these teams can truly be, because they do lack a performance against what I consider a Big 12 contender so far. Well, I guess Utah lost to a Big 12 contender. I just think that Tech team is the class of the conference. That's why I still think Utah is going to end up being good. But I think the biggest story, we hit it on a little bit already, Sam, but I think it's Cincinnati. This is a legit team to me. This is an impressive win against Iowa State. A loss like this is why I did not have Iowa State in the conversation with Tech, even going into this week. I just think Tech's been dominant, and they dominated Houston again too. But what was your biggest takeaway from this week's Big 12 action?
100% Cincinnati, Iowa State. This also kind of shook my confidence with Iowa State a little bit. I mean, maybe Cincinnati's better than we thought, so maybe it's a good loss. But like looking back at Iowa State's results, they only beat Kansas State by 3 points. That's not an amazing win. Yeah, that's not as good of a win as you would like from what it's supposed to be potentially a top 10 team, a top 15 team, you know? So maybe Iowa State isn't as good as we thought, but I do think Cincinnati is a lot better than we thought. And randomly, for all these Big 12 teams that have Cincinnati on the back half of their schedule, they're now getting a little nervous. They're now on the edge of their seats. Like you said, I covered BYU. BYU plays Cincinnati at Cincinnati in November. Out of nowhere, like 5 weeks ago, that would be, okay, cross it off, a win.
Yep.
Out of nowhere, that's one of your biggest games of the season. That could define whether or not you make a Big 12 championship game. So I think that's the biggest storyline of last week.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the Utah schedule right too now, and I go, okay, you're going to see Arizona State. And originally, I thought like, yeah, you play BYU, but then you get Colorado and Cincinnati. I feel good about Utah against Colorado, but that Cincinnati game,
Yeah.
that's no cakewalk, as you mentioned. Same way that Sorsby, Scott Satterfield, that defensive line, they got one of the best D tackles in the conference. They got some. Excuse me, they got some things working down there for Cincinnati. And yeah, Iowa State's resume, like I'm not impressed by a 3-point win against Iowa at home. If you are one of the best teams in the Big 12, like you beat that Iowa team by more than that to me. That's why I was so impressed with Tech rolling in and throttling a Utah. And Tech said, hey, we're not a one-hit wonder in terms of Big 12 play. We're going to do the same dang thing to Houston. Literally won by the exact same amount. And I think they made the right call, continuing to roll with Morton. I thought Hammond did some good things when he came in late against Utah, but that was more lightning in a bottle to me. I thought Morton looked impressive. Tech looked impressive. And this is the class of the Big 12 still, right, Sam? I think they're really in a tier of their own. I do.
It's Texas Tech than everyone else.
Yeah.
It's not close. I mean,
mm-hmm.
you can make an argument for who 2, 3, 4, 5 is if you want to throw Utah, BYU, Arizona State, Iowa State is still in contention. I mean, I don't want to write them completely off, but yeah, it's kind of disappointing a little bit just how much of a non-competition it seems to be. It's just Texas Tech. Unless something crazy happens throughout the season, they're just going to run away with the regular season championship.
It feels like it to me. Like can a Utah and several of these teams get in there, and can they upset Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game? Sure. But I'll say this. I think it'd absolutely be an upset. I don't know if Tech's going to lose a game in Big 12 play. I'm not trying to overreact to a win against a Utah and a Houston, who, as we've kind of covered in this episode, like Houston's another team. How good are they? You go on the road, you barely beat an Oregon State team that's 0-6. You need overtime. And I know Houston beat Colorado, but we already got done with talking about like that's a Colorado team. Yeah, they've made things interesting in some of these games, not against Houston, but they also continue to lose them. So you got to start to win some at some point if you're the Buffs. So Houston and Utah, both teams are still figuring out, but Tech looks incredibly impressive. And, I mentioned earlier, I thought Kansas State is bad. I shouldn't have said bad. I think their record will not be great is what I should say. I think Kansas State this year is last year's Kansas. I won't be surprised at all if they knock off a good team, because last year's Kansas was capable of that. Jalen Daniels and the Jayhawks, they struggled last year. Then boom, down goes Colorado, down goes BYU, down goes Iowa State. I'm not saying Kansas State will do that, but they really gave Baylor a scare. That's an offense I like, a Baylor defense I don't love, but Kansas State to me is still a team led by Chris Klieman. I like Avery Johnson. I think they're going to get someone along the way, Sam, and Utah's got to be careful to make sure it's not them.
That is the biggest trap game on Utah's schedule. Second to last week of the season?
Yes.
Because it goes Kansas State, then Kansas. Kansas State, everybody wrote them off as like, oh, they are like bottom 10 teams in the FBS. After the loss to Army and barely beating North Dakota, it was like, this team is just going to get pummeled throughout the rest of the season. And they've been competitive. They should have beat Baylor. It was a fluky helmet came off in the middle of the play away from them beating Baylor. And you can't sleep against these guys. And so that's the biggest game. I'm kind of like dreading that one a little bit, because that's just a classic. It would be so typical for Kansas State to go in and beat Utah right there, and maybe play spoiler to somebody's season. It doesn't have to be Utah. You can name any team in the Big 12, and they can go in, catch somebody off guard, play spoiler. It happened to BYU last year with Kansas, like you said. Kansas played spoiler to half the teams in the Big 12. And they were the reason that BYU was not in the Big 12 championship game, because out of nowhere, this 4-win Kansas team waltzes into Provo and plays the greatest defensive game that anybody had played against BYU to that point.
You're absolutely right. I'm looking at their schedule right now. I mean, you just can't convince me they're going to go 0-4 against TCU, Kansas, Tech, and Utah. Like they play Oklahoma State and Colorado. Those are very winnable games. And honestly, with their ceiling and floor, maybe they even find a way to lose them. But they're knocking off one of those teams, maybe even two of them. It's going to be interesting to see. That's why we love the Big 12. It's absolute chaos. It's a blast of a conference to cover. And Sam, you do a great job covering it with the Daily Universe for BYU. Please let everyone know where they can find your work at.
Yeah, so I'm the sports editor for the Daily Universe, which is BYU's student newspaper. So you can follow me on Twitter at SAMFOS1ER. That's at SAMFOS1ER. Report for BYU. Also, I'm coming out with some freelance articles with the Salt Lake Tribune later this fall. So just stay in tune for that. And yeah, thanks for having me on, JT.
It's awesome, man. You do a great job. Really appreciate you making the time, Sam. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too, man.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. A reminder to come back tomorrow as we'll keep you rocking and rolling with your Utah coverage. We got a great matchup on Saturday, but also in the meantime, don't forget to keep an eye out for Locked On and Fire TV's college football kickoff. Drake Toll, AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts all collide in a college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch college football kickoff every Thursday throughout the season only on Fire TV. That's going to do it for our show. We'll see you tomorrow.